All right, so hi, this is Erin Mason, and I'm very pleased to have with me today Caroline Lopez also joining me. Caroline is at Chapman University, and I'm from DePaul University in Chicago, so we'll both kind of chime in a little bit about the topic of flipping courses in school counselor preparation. And the reason that we're having this conversation together is because she and I started a conversation at the ACES conference, and since I was asked to talk about using a flipped model for the sake of the network, I wanted to include Caroline so you get multiple perspectives on this topic, because I do think that people who are doing flipping are doing it in different ways and for different reasons. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to start with Caroline and have her tell you a little bit about why she's flipping, and then I'll respond to that question as well. So Caroline, you chime in and talk about why you're flipping.
Okay. The reason I started to flip my courses, or I flipped my Intro to School Counseling course and my Best Practices in School Counseling course, which is the capstone course. I was running into the challenge that my students were having the most difficult time completing the assignments. That's really where they needed the most help and the most support, and just kind of talking through their thoughts and ideas. And so I really wanted more class time to dedicate to that, but at the same time, I had a lot of material to cover. In our program, there is no course on how to build a comprehensive counseling program. So I was trying to fit that into the Intro to School Counseling class. So it was a lot of information. And so it was just the balance of how do I provide all this content information, but at the same time allow them to engage in these discussions and have support in the assignments. And so I thought the flipped classroom approach was the best solution for that. So again, allowing them time to get the most content possible in the class through the video lectures, and then dedicating the class time to supporting them through their assignments. And then the same is said for my Best Practices class. They have a capstone project, which is essentially an action research study that they engage in. Again, for that assignment, they really need my support talking through their research questions, their instruments, their interventions. And so flipping the classroom in that course as well was the best approach to provide them that support.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds like we're kind of flipping for some of the same reasons. And I know you said you're in your second year of doing this. I've been doing it for probably about 5 years or so. And really, you kind of hit the nail on the head about why I was doing it, and that was just time and needing to be able to get everything into a course and get the content into the course, and feeling like I was struggling doing that face to face. And I really had started reading probably about maybe into my second year. So that would have been probably about 2010 or so, or 2009. I started reading what Bergman and Sams are doing, who are the ones that really started the whole kind of flipped concept at the high school level. So they were science teachers who kind of created this model where they were using YouTube videos to supplement their science courses. So yeah, for me primarily it was a time factor. I also would add that one of the reasons why I flip too is that I just feel like I'm able to almost provide a deeper learning experience for students. And one of the things that I really like about the flipped model is that depending upon the kind of technology that you're using and how you're using it, it gives students some reinforcement of material that they can go back to. So if you're doing a live lecture, unless they're recording it, on video, they can't go back to it. So if you're doing lectures, and we'll kind of talk about how you and I are both doing this, it gives them material that they can go back to besides just the book. So there've been a number of reasons, and I've found that the student feedback is positive. So maybe that's something that you and I can also talk about, is just what our students say, what their reactions are to the whole flipped learning. So I know that you said that you're using it for intro to school counseling and then a best practices course. So I'll just kind of chime in there and say what I'm using it in is actually 4 different courses. So I teach our intro to counseling course, which is we have 3 different concentrations or tracks. And so I teach the very first course in the program that students take. So I'm using it there. I'm also using it into kind of what would be similar to your intro to school counseling and best practices course. We have 2 sort of core school counseling courses that way, using it in both of those. And then we also have another course that I teach that's learning theory and classroom management. So it's a course that's required by the state for our students who don't have a teaching background or a teaching license. And so I use it there as well. So I pretty much use it in all the courses that I'm teaching, and you know, kind of have nuanced how it fits with each of those different courses, but do find that it's an effective tool that can be used across a broad range of courses and across a broad range of content. So you and I've kind of talked about the why and then the what, which hopefully is helpful for people to hear about. Why don't we sort of talk about the how piece? So if I could flip it back to you and talk a little bit, flip it, you notice how I snuck that in there. Flip it back over to you and have you talk about how you're actually doing it in your classes.
Okay. So the way I found most effective for me is, so I started one class first. So I'm very much of the belief, and I tell my students is do one thing really well. So and not to overwhelm myself or my students, I wanted to flip one classroom really well. So I started off with one course. And what I did was I began utilizing LiveBinder. And I think that was the best way for me to introduce the material to the students. We use Blackboard, but it's just, for me, it's not as, I don't feel it's as user-friendly, and it's not as easy to give them the materials they need quickly. So everything I have is on LiveBinder. If you're not familiar with LiveBinder, it's essentially kind of a virtual binder. There's tabs on your website, and just same way as a binder would look like, and you get to organize your material accordingly. And you can put in PDFs, Word documents, you can connect links to YouTube videos, websites, things like that. And so that was the best way for me to set up the course that way. So students will click on the LiveBinder, and for that week, they have there's on the front tab, it will tell them everything they need to do for the day. So it may be, read this short article and watch the lecture video. And then I also provide them with the class agenda. So I really had to be thoughtful in what am I going to do each class, and how am I going to connect the lecture video to the activities in the course. Because again, I read the Bergman book, and looking at YouTube videos as well on flipped counselors or flipped training. It's the same thing as reading. If you don't connect it to the course, they won't watch the videos. It really has to be connected to what you're doing in the class. So they have an agenda, and it says, watch this video, and this is how we'll be using the information in the class on Thursday. And so they go ahead and they watch the video, and then we will do something related to that topic. So for my Intro to School Counseling course, they begin to work on their large group project. So we begin one piece at a time, building a comprehensive counseling program. So the lecture might be on developing action plans and lesson plans and how to do that. And then in class, then we discuss what questions they have. And then we also begin that first piece of their assignment, which is developing their action plan. So they get to really learn the information and then apply it in the class. For my lecture videos, I use VoiceThread. Essentially, it's pretty user-friendly. If you're just starting out flipping a classroom, you can essentially just load your PowerPoint slides, and you click on the slide, and then you just record your voice. The reason I used that was because I wanted the students to be able to ask questions ahead of time. So students are able to watch the slide and listen to the content, and then they're able to either submit a text question on the actual slide or submit a video or a audio voice question. And so I also tell my students, if there's a specific slide that you're unclear about, go ahead and leave a question, and then we can begin to answer those in the classroom. I'm trying to think how else I tried to set this up. I think the biggest thing was just planning. So really just being intentional on what am I going to cover in the lecture video, and then how are we going to use that information in the classroom. And I really like it because it really challenges them to think and to take it a step further with the information, because we have the time to do that. So for example, building the comprehensive counseling program, if my students begin talking about the different types of needs assessments, we can have a discussion on what types of needs assessment would you need? What are the realities of being a school counselor, and how would you go about collecting that information? So it challenges them to really think about the logistics and implementation and what support do we need. So it takes it a step further as opposed to just kind of learning content.
So one question I have for you, and then I'll kind of talk about the how part on my end. Mm-hmm. What is the kind of mix of your own videos in terms of the things that you do on VoiceThread versus maybe outside videos that you're bringing in? What's sort of your percentage of mix there?
I would say the majority are my videos that I created, because again, it was the intro to school counseling is I'm squeezing in a lot of material, so I had to figure out a way to do that. And the best way to do that was just to create my own lecture videos. I have used a few others. I think there's a YouTube video on the history of school counseling that I've used. Some of my students have asked in my capstone course, they get kind of a user's choice one day. So they get to pick what we're going to learn in the class that day. And they requested learning an additional counseling theory. So I've used some of the YouTube videos on counseling theories, and then we, again, do role play or practicing that in the classroom.
Okay. All right. That's good for me to know, because that's kind of a question I'm considering right now is just the blend of video sources. So in terms of how I'm doing my own version of flipping, it's evolved over time. And I think that that's one thing for folks to know, is that as you get more comfortable with it, it is kind of something that you dive into, and then you have to sort of figure out how it fits with your teaching style and with the content. And I think it does evolve over time as a practice. So we are using Desire to Learn. We were Blackboard before, and now we're just using Desire to Learn, which is, again, another learning management system. And I don't use LiveBinders. That was good to hear about, because I can definitely envision how that works for a course, and I am very familiar with LiveBinders. But I do use VoiceThread as well, and I do find it also to be very user-friendly, and like the fact that that students can comment on it and ask their questions. So I use it in the same way that you do, where I ask students to make comments, ask questions on the VoiceThread as they're listening to my lecture. And then we go over those in class when we meet face to face. A couple of things that I will add is that, oh shoot, my idea just went out of my head. But anyway, so I do use VoiceThread. Oh, what I was going to say was, you might want to check with for those who are watching the video, you might want to check with your university and see if you have a university license for VoiceThread. I know we do, and so that's made it really easy to be able to use that tool. And there are different tools that I think that you could use for this. I mean, you could do screencasting, you could use more kind of typical narrated PowerPoint, other kinds of tools like iMovie, things like that. So there are a multitude of different options that I think that you have. I would echo what you said, Caroline, about the time that it gives you to do application in the classroom. So probably where this comes into biggest play for me is that in our second kind of course, school counseling course, which for us is where they learn about the Ask a National Model, they learn what RAMP is, and in the course of that course, as well as the previous course, which they take back to back, they are working with a local school. They're not providing any direct service, but they are creating a needs assessment, and then they're basically developing a whole program to address the needs that come out of that needs assessment, and they're presenting to people at the school. And anyway, so it's kind of a field-based experience course, And so there's a lot of need in the classroom time for us to talk through, the bumps that they hit along the road with that. Well, why didn't that work? Well, what might you do instead? What happens if this is in real life? What do school counselors really do when they're trying to handle the situation? Similar to what you're talking about. And so them being able to watch sort of the end content, based on the text and whatever readings they're doing is really helpful in terms of the application, particularly for those courses that are really hands-on. I know a question that I get a lot, and you probably do too, and so maybe you can speak to this as well, is how long are you lecturing for? And I find that I'm actually lecturing less. So my voice threads, my lectures tend to be probably maybe 20 minutes rather than the time that I might take in a typical class where maybe I would take an hour. And the reason I'm taking longer in person is because I'm answering questions. So I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about just the length of the recordings that you're doing.
Yeah, so my lectures are about close to the same amount of time. I actually do maybe about a 15-minute lecture, so pretty similar to your 20-minute lectures. And I don't like lecturing. It's just not my style. As I'm talking, I'm telling myself like I'm talking too much. I want them to talk. And so that's why I really like the lecture videos, because I know it'll be a brief 15-minute video, and then the entire class time is dialogue and discussion between them. And that's really my teaching style, and this is why kind of the flipped classroom approach works for me. There is a YouTube channel, Dr. Lodge McCammon, and he kind of touches, it's a really good resource to have if you're starting off kind of flipping your classroom. He gives you different examples on how to do it, and he really talked about how lecture videos kind of cut through that discussion or the trying to joke with them or introducing yourself or the material, and you kind of really go straight into the content. And so because of that, it cuts down on your lecture time. And so I really like that. It's about a 15-minute video. I mentioned earlier that we don't have a class on how to build a counseling program. So I've squeezed a lot of material into the intro course, which can be a lot for someone who's in their first semester, starting off, learning what grad school is about. And so that's really been, the flipped classroom approach has been really beneficial, because they know that we're going through the assignments together, that I'm there to kind of talk through it with them and support them. So it has not been as overwhelming as it could be for my students.
Yeah, so that's helpful to hear. I think maybe now what we can do just to kind of wrap up our conversation is maybe just any tips or ideas that you have about kind of avoiding or dealing with some of the challenges that maybe come up. I know for me, I would say that when I first started doing this, students were pretty skeptical. It's less so now as the years have gone on. I think there are more people that are doing it, more students that are used to it. But in the beginning, the idea for students that I was not going to take up class time to do a long lecture was a paradigm shift for them. And it was for me too. And I was happy to just kind of jump in with both feet and try it out. But it definitely was something that took a little bit of everybody getting used to. There were a few instances where I had students who had difficulty accessing VoiceThread, or those kinds of technical issues would come up. I've had far less of that in recent times, and so I think over the last couple of years, a lot of those kinds of technical issues have sort of smoothed themselves out. And now that pretty much everybody, or at least most people, have smartphones, I think that's one of the things that students have told me that they really like too, is that they like being able to be mobile with their learning. And so in Chicago, for example, lots of people ride the train to and from work or to and from school, and so they can listen to the lecture while they're traveling, and that seems to be helping to reinforce that content. But I think my biggest challenge was in the beginning and getting started. It was just knowing how long to do the lectures, kind of getting comfortable with just using a new technology and with doing the lecture in that format where I was narrating and, I wasn't necessarily lecturing in front of my students during class time, except to sort of supplement what I was doing. So it was definitely a shift. And I found that what was really a good challenge for me was thinking more creatively about how to use that class time. Because I typically, even when I would lecture, I would still have some kind of activity component. But with this, you have so much more time that you're having to think about, okay, instead of having, just an hour for an activity, now I suddenly have 2 hours, and I really need to think about how I'm going to use that. So that was a good challenge for me. But I wondered if you could kind of speak to just challenges and even reactions from students to the flipped model.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the beginning, one of the challenges was, I'd have to agree, was kind of just learning whatever tool I was going to use to record my video lectures and just kind of getting used to that. I think another thing was in relation to just using my students getting comfortable using so much technology. So I had to learn that I have to help them set up their accounts and walk them through what LiveBinder looks like and how to access the videos and PDFs and things like that. So that was kind of a learning experience in itself, that, okay, they can't easily navigate through this new tool. I have to kind of walk them through it initially that first time. And then they were super comfortable with it. As far as feedback, my students love it. They want everything on LiveBinder as opposed to Blackboard. They think it's really accessible. Even as we're in class having discussions, they'll ask for a particular resource, and I can easily just put it on LiveBinder right then and there, and it pops up on their laptops. Another thing was just because of that, the type of activities we had in the classroom, whether it was something focused on developing an action plan and beginning to write up a plan, I had to remind them ahead of time to bring their laptops or to schedule a lab that they can work in. And so again, kind of going back to that planning ahead of time, how am I going to use this time? What resources are they going to need? Now, one of the things that I'm noticing is my students are moving along in their kind of project-based learning, so completing a needs assessment or developing an action plan, and some really get it really quickly, so kind of differentiating instruction. So those who are still kind of working and progressing at the expected pace, they're fine. But then my students who are moving ahead, what activities do they do in that time? And so trying to differentiate that instruction and setting up my assignments or my activities so that they can continue to move forward while I support those who need additional help is kind of my next step. What other supplemental activities do I put in place so that those who are done can continue to do the work?
All right, Caroline, well, I appreciate you being online with me today to have this conversation, and hopefully it gives some folks in our network something to think about, and hopefully there'll be some questions on the call next week. But again, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate being able to talk about this topic with you.
Thank you so much.